Okay, welcome back. This is Chapter 8. We're going to talk about motor vehicle stops, searches, and inventories. Most of you, if you've ever driven or ridden in a car, you've dealt with the police in this context. The heart of law enforcement is usually patrol, and whether they're patrol officers are looking for everything: crimes in progress, traffic violations, traffic crashes, impaired drivers, reckless drivers, and that's how they respond to something going on, whether it's a shooting at somebody's house, and it starts there. So, but most people, most of you, all of you have been in a motor vehicle, and so this is a good chance for you aspiring police officers or police officers and people who are in vehicles to know what the police can do and know, what is okay, what is not okay, how to get into that car, and so forth. So here we go. First off, when a cop gets behind someone and turns on those lights, that is a seizure if that person pulls over. If they run, they're not seized because, well, haven't submitted to the authority of those, disco lights, we call them, blue lights. So before a police officer does that, let's make sure we understand if a cop turns on his blue lights behind you and you pull over and he goes by because he's trying to go to an emergency situation, that's not a seizure. A traffic stop is a seizure. So for a police to do that, if it is a seizure by definition, and it is, the police must have met the burden of proof to do that legally. They can't just pull over a car arbitrarily. They can't say, I want to see, let's see if that guy's got a license. Let's see if he's got registration. Other countries can do that. Ours cannot. So again, that officer must have a minimum of reasonable suspicion to make a stop. Most police officers make traffic stops with probable cause of a traffic violation. They see a vehicle that's speeding. And when I say they see a vehicle that's speeding, they can't just say, oh, well, it's speeding, or push the button on a radar. They actually have to be trained. I visually estimated that speed to be 70 miles per hour. I activated a radar antenna in front stationary mode and got a good tone confirming that the actual speed was 71 miles an hour in whatever speed zone that might be. Again, now that would be probable cause, believe they committed a traffic violation. Or even you see a vehicle make a lane change without using a turn signal. That's another traffic violation based on probable cause. But let's say there was a bank robbery in the area, and the description was given that there was a white male in a silver four-door car traveling this direction that left the scene, and you're driving towards that area and you see a white male in a silver four-door car in very close proximity. You don't know if that's the person who actually did it, but you have reasonable suspicion to believe this might be the person, so a traffic stop would be okay. There's no PC. Let's say you pull over the driver and the driver says, I just left the gym and here's my gym clothes, and what more do you want? And then next thing you know, the officer hears, hey, we're in pursuit of a car, the actual car, somewhere else. Well, you write down the name of the person that you stopped, and then you go about your business. Or you stop the person that fit the description, and he's got a ski mask on the front seat and a dye pack from the money in the back seat that just blew up. Well, now you have probable cause to arrest that person, for which you weren't even sure if that was the person who did it. So, reasonable suspicion and probable cause. Probable cause, you have a criminal activity, which a traffic crime is a criminal activity by statute. The legislature wrote a law that said you can't exceed the speed limit, you got to wear your seatbelt, so forth and so on. There's a case involving DWI that a guy challenged. He got his 17-year-old daughter called in and said, hey, my dad just left here and he's drunk. Gave his name, description of the vehicle, and also gave the license plate number. So, you've got a lot of descriptive factors there. But, as far as the police know, she could have been a 17-year-old mad because dad took her iPhone. But that was still enough for the police to say, okay, let me stop, look out for this vehicle. If I see it, go ahead and stop it to make sure that it's not an actual drunk driver. And it was. And they arrested him for drunk driving. Didn't see any other traffic violations at all, actually. But the father, he said, well, there was no probable cause to search. Well, he's right. No probable cause to make that traffic stop. He was right. There was no PC. But there was reasonable suspicion based on the report. Specific information. It said, hey, this guy's all over, my dad's drunk. He just left here. He's all over the road. That's a legitimate thing that the police can check out, and they should. You don't want to just say, oh, well, get behind him and he doesn't commit a traffic violation and goes up the road and kills somebody. That wouldn't be good for anybody. A vehicle stop is less intrusive than a home search, so therefore a warrant is not required. Probable cause is not required. Again, we must have just reasonable suspicion. Once the vehicle is stopped, there's a lot of things that the officers can do, like they can order the driver out of the vehicle. They can order the passenger out of the vehicle. They can order people to stay inside the vehicle for a certain period of time. You can't just keep somebody in there indefinitely. I guess a good example would be you stop me and my girlfriend or me and my wife for speeding. And I pull over in the parking lot of where she works, because that's just where we turn on the lights and that was it. And she's going to be late for work. Her shift starts in 15 minutes. Okay, you get my information. You see that I'm no threat. You see that I have a passenger, and I say, hey, my wife works here. Can she go to work? And unless you have a reason to detain her to continue that detention, that person actually has to be let go. Now if she just jumps out and runs, that's a problem. That's not going to be okay. The officer can control that scene until he makes sure everything's okay before people just jump out and start running away. That's not going to fly. But let's say you're towing my car because my license is suspended or I have no insurance and I'm going to be there for an hour, and you say, you both got to stay in the vehicle until I get done with this. That would be an unlawful detention. So that would have to, the detention of that passenger would have to be justified in some way, and that's just not it. So a vehicle stop and a vehicle search are two different things. Just because an officer has probable cause to believe that a driver has committed a traffic violation, that does not give probable cause to search. Because what makes you think I have drugs in the car? Because I was speeding. Well, it doesn't. So you can't just automatically search a car. Now walking up to the car, looking inside, that's not a search. That's okay. Inspecting the VIN plate on the windshield, inspecting the VIN sticker inside the door, which does require you to open the door. That's also okay. While the door's open, maybe the officer can see under the seat. That's okay too. Can't stick his head inside and look under the seat or reach under there without probable cause, but all that's okay too. So if you got a guy who's, we'll say, a convicted felon, open the door to check the VIN plate and you see a .357 hand cannon underneath the front seat, well, he's not allowed to have that. So that's probable cause to search a vehicle and take that weapon and charge him with unauthorized possession of a weapon by a convicted felon. And that's actually punishable in Louisiana by up to 10 years. Not up to 10 years, minimum of 10 years. Here's an interesting case where a car was being driven in a case. It was called a circuitous route. So basically the car is weaving in the lane of traffic, but not actually crossing the line. That's not illegal. You can, on a motorcycle and a car, as long as you don't cross the fog line or cross the center line, you're actually within your lane of travel, and that's okay. The police saw it operating in that manner and decided to make a traffic stop because it was being navigated in a circuitous route, weaving. And police stopped it because they thought he might be drunk, even though they had no traffic violation. Well, the courts actually sided with the police on that one. I've never actually done this one, and I've stopped hundreds of people. I've arrested hundreds and hundreds of people, if not pushing 1,000, or at least evaluated impaired drivers at that level. Never did this actually. I always had probable cause to make the traffic stop, but that option is available. It's weak, but it's available. Someone weaving but not actually committing a traffic violation, it's okay to make that stop. But I would also double check with your DA's office if you're going to try to do this one, because I'd hate for a good DWI case to get thrown out because if you'd have just waited a few extra seconds for them to cross the line, or not use a turn signal, or even look at an equipment violation, it's always better to have probable cause. Things that the police can do, again, they can order the driver and passenger out of the vehicle. They can ask the driver to produce documents required by state law. You've heard it. License, registration, proof of insurance. All those things are required to be carried in most states, and if they don't have those things, that's actually probable cause for other violations. They can question the driver and passengers without Miranda warnings, and when we're talking about questioning them, like, hey, I stopped you for speeding. Is there any reason for going that fast? Well, technically that's an interrogation. And if they answer that question, it might be considered a confession. Well, I was going so fast because I'm late for work. Well, you just admitted to speeding, basically. That's okay to do without Miranda. But now let's say, why are you speeding? You say, well, I killed my wife. She's in the trunk, and I'm trying to go over there to bury the body. It's time to give Miranda at that point. So we don't want to go further in questioning without giving the Miranda warnings. Locate and examine the vehicle identification number, and it's several places on the vehicle. It's on the windshield. It can be etched in the glass, and it's also on the sticker in the driver's door. So that can be open to be inspected. Seize items in plain view. If the officer walks up and sees something clearly illegal in plain view, like we'll say an open container, most cops can pick out a beer can out of a lineup because they drink them. So they know what a Dos Equis can looks like or a Budweiser can looks like. So that would be an item in plain view. And if it has any amount of alcoholic beverage inside of it, that is a violation of the open container law. So they would be able to seize that. Or let's say you were just dumb enough to leave a kilo of cocaine on the front seat. Yeah, they could seize that too. They can search passengers or any occupant of the vehicle for weapons as long as they have reasonable suspicion to believe that person might be armed. So let's say they pull over the driver and he has a concealed handgun permit license as the registered owner. Well, that would be reasonable suspicion to believe that person is armed. If that person is armed, it's not illegal. It's just the courts give the police the option to disarm people on a lawful detention. So that would be a lawful detention, a traffic stop. So, a concealed handgun permit, they could disarm them or choose not to do anything. But let's say they pulled them over and the guy's got a criminal history, 15 pages long, including violent offenses. That's enough. There's a bulge underneath the waistband, whatever, something that says this person might be armed. Automatic pat-downs on traffic stops are not okay. But if there's reasonable suspicion to believe that they may be armed, that is okay. They can search the vehicle as long as there's probable cause. Search passenger belongings. If a drug dog alerts, the whole vehicle is fair game. Or if the officer, will say, finds marijuana in the pocket of one of the persons, or whatever the case may be. Like I'll give you an example of something that I did, and I hope I haven't told this story yet, but. We needed to try out a dispatcher to kind of see if she could handle a stressful environment. So they told me, he said, go out and keep her busy. So I went out and I said, well, let me go find some drugs. So I stood on the side of the interstate, got out of my car, and I just watched cars go by, cars go by, cars go by. And as they went by, I looked for the guy that I thought might have drugs on him. And you're thinking, how can a state trooper stand on the side of the interstate at 80 miles an hour and pick out a guy who's got drugs on his person? Well, I saw the guy who I thought had drugs on his person. I jumped in the car and took off and stopped him. And you're thinking, what'd you stop him for? Well, I stopped him because he didn't have a seatbelt. But I also stopped him because he was a white male, very skinny, long, stringy hair like it hadn't been washed in a year, tattoos all over his chest, and at 70 miles an hour I could tell he had bad teeth. He was a meth head. That's profiling, however you want to look at it. He was a meth head. So I thought he might have meth on him. Did I have probable cause to believe it? No. But I had probable cause to believe that he wasn't wearing his seatbelt because I had a clear view of his chest. Tattooed. And so he pulls over. I didn't even order the driver out because I didn't have probable cause to believe he did anything wrong. He had his seatbelt on. I said, passenger, come back here. He gets out, walks to the back of the car, which I'm legally allowed to do, order anyone out of the vehicle. And so I said, hey, can I see your ID? He didn't have it. He wasn't driving. He doesn't have to have an ID on him. So he had not done anything, other than not wearing a seatbelt at that point. I said, okay, that's fine. What is your name? And he gave me a name like John Smith or something like that. And I didn't think that was accurate. So I said, well, who's Wayne Hall? And he looked at me like, how did this guy actually know my name? Because we've never met before. And anyway, his eyes got really big, but I knew that his real name was Wayne Hall. The reason I knew it was because in bold block lettering tattooed across his stomach was the name Wayne Hall. And most people don't tattoo another guy's name on your chest. Maybe a man will do that anyway, it didn't happen. It doesn't happen. So he said, oh, my name's Wayne Hall. Well, then I immediately searched him, and I was looking for methamphetamine, and I did find methamphetamine in his pocket immediately. The reason I was able to do that, I didn't have probable cause to believe he had methamphetamine, but one, I had reasonable suspicion to pat him down for weapons, which doesn't give you the right to look for methamphetamine. But when he told me his name was something else, that's called resisting an officer by providing false information. He was on a lawful detention. He is required by law to give me the right information. Had he not done anything wrong, like if he was wearing his seatbelt, and I said, what's your name? He's actually allowed to lie to me, not to the feds. Don't lie to the feds. They'll put you under the jail. Ask Martha Stewart about that. But he ended up, he lied to me, so therefore I could arrest him and search him incident to that arrest. So I searched him, found methamphetamine, arrested him. And then I got to search the whole car for more methamphetamine. And I didn't find more methamphetamine, but I did find a gun in the trunk, and they were both convicted felons. So it was a pretty, significant, whole lot going on with that car. But again, I searched for methamphetamine without probable cause. But I had probable cause to believe he, one, wasn't wearing a seatbelt, which doesn't give me the right to search, but I had probable cause to believe that he resisted an officer by providing false information. Therefore, I could search incident to arrest, whether I believe there was methamphetamine or not. So that's kind of how we can play with the rules legally and get into somebody's pockets. Again, he met the profile of somebody I thought might be on methamphetamine, but that's not probable cause. That's not reasonable suspicion. It's just simple criminal profiling. You can't just say, hell, well, he looks like a serial killer because he's a white male in his mid-30s or middle-aged white male. But you can say, hey, we're looking for a serial killer. Let's start stopping people who fit that profile to try to catch the serial killer. Maybe find some evidence or whatever. Get a DNA test. Okay. We talked a little bit about roadblocks already. Roadblocks are okay, but they must have a valid justification that's supported by the courts. So, for instance, the courts have supported insurance checkpoints and DWI checkpoints, seatbelt checkpoints in the state of Louisiana. So whether you agree with them or not, they are legal. And so if a bunch of cops want to block the road, that's perfectly fine. And people are required to comply, to stop. Now, if somebody wants to turn around and go the other direction, they can actually legally do that as long as they use their turn signal and don't make a U-turn in a prohibited area. So a lot of DWI checkpoints that I worked, they had a chase car, for somebody who turned around. And people who turn around at DWI checkpoints, probably drunk, but you didn't stop them for turning around. You stopped them once you saw a traffic violation. And of course, I've seen a lot where they just stopped them for turning around. You can't do that. That was a mistake on their part. When I ran a DWI checkpoint, we made sure that was clear. All right. To search a vehicle, again, we must have probable cause. To pat down a vehicle, we must have reasonable suspicion. So reasonable suspicion that there might be a weapon in the vehicle, that's a pat down of a vehicle, even though it looks just like a search. You open the glove box, you look, make sure there's not a hand cannon in there, look in the console, look under the seat. But we're not ripping the door panels off. If you got somebody who you suspect there might be drugs in the car and you have probable cause to believe it, dog alert, the door panels can't come off. That might be a civil issue, but there's probable cause to search one area of the vehicle for drugs. Anywhere in the vehicle can be searched. All this, the reason we're able to do this under without a warrant is under the Carroll exception. Again, in 1925, cops stopped a vehicle. I believe they suspected it had illegal whiskey, moonshine, back in the bootlegging days of the 1920s, and they searched it for the alcohol. Found the alcohol, but they did all that without a warrant. That was challenged, and the Supreme Court said it was okay because they established the Carroll doctrine, otherwise known as the automobile exception to the warrant requirement. Let me make sure this is clear. This is very clear. So we talked about search incident to arrest. You heard me say that the guy got out of the car. I searched him incident to arrest. And I was okay because I was looking in his pockets. I didn't search the vehicle incident to arrest because I didn't have probable cause to believe that there was anything in the vehicle yet. Once I found the meth, we were okay. Now, a vehicle cannot be searched incident to arrest. In 2009, that actually changed. Prior to 2009, you could arrest anybody for anything. If they were in a vehicle, you could hit the vehicle too. That was perfectly fine. Supreme Court supported that up until 2009. In Arizona v. Gantt, no more. They got rid of it. So, search incident to arrest does not apply to a vehicle. But where it does apply is with probable cause. So let's say you stop somebody for not wearing their seatbelt. They didn't pay a speeding ticket. You arrest them. They have a bench warrant for not paying a speeding ticket. You arrest them. There is no search of the vehicle incident to that arrest because what evidence are you looking for? You have no probable cause to believe it. Now, if you stop somebody for they're speeding, they get out, they're obviously intoxicated, they fail a field sobriety test, well, they get arrested. So now searching the vehicle incident to that arrest, you're not searching an incident to arrest, you're actually searching it for evidence associated with a crime for which you just arrested them for. What are people impaired on? Alcohol and drugs. So the vehicle can now be searched for alcohol and drugs. That's perfectly fine. But it's not arbitrary. It's not automatic like it used to be. In Arizona v. Gant, it was automatic. I used it all the time. A guy who just looks like he might have drugs on him, a pothead I call it, kind of his eyes are a little red and bloodshot, but I don't smell the marijuana, but I think, this guy's probably got some in there. And then when you ask him about it, he's like, no, well, let me search. Oh, no, I'm not letting you search, especially the console. And anyway, so I'd say run him for warrants. And he had a warrant on him for traffic. Well, you're under arrest. And by the way, now I'm going to search the car incident to that arrest. That was okay up until 2009. No more. It's gone. So if I wanted to get into the car, you just can't unless you have a reason to believe that there's evidence in the car. Motorhomes. We got a lot of motorhomes here, especially, we recently, if you're watching this video, I'm not sure the date you'll be watching it, but we got hit by another hurricane. A lot of people are going to be staying in motorhomes and RVs and stuff like that. If a motorhome, especially if it's on the road, it may be their home, but it's considered an automobile, so no warrant is required for that. Now, if you put in an RV park, take the tires and axles off of it, put it on blocks, that's a house, that's a trailer house, so a warrant's going to be needed for that. If there's any question, get a warrant. That's simple. We talked about border searches. We talked about Arizona v. Gant. Putting tracking devices on vehicles. There was a lot of cops putting tracking devices on vehicles, which is perfectly fine. They used to be able to do it if you found a car in Walmart, you just put it on in a public area, and then you were okay. But now, that's since been challenged, and without a warrant, you cannot put a tracking device on a vehicle. It's illegal. It's a criminal. I think it's a criminal. It's a criminal violation, and it violates the Fourth Amendment. So any evidence obtained from that. So let's say you put a tracking device on a vehicle to try to track somebody where they might have dumped a body. Well, you get the location of the body, find the body because of that, and the evidence of the body could likely be thrown at. So it's okay to put a tracking device on a vehicle only after a warrant. I want to make sure I cover this. So this is a case, Rodriguez versus United States 2015. It's not that new of a case, but I keep running across situations where the police are not aware of this. So they wrote a guy a ticket, and once they wrote him the ticket, they asked for consent to search the vehicle. He said no. And look, once you finish the traffic stop, give the ticket, a lot of cops were basically saying, here's your ticket, I'm going to cut you a break or whatever it is. Oh, by the way, before you go, can I search your car? Once that point hits, the traffic stop is over. You've concluded your traffic stop. Therefore, they are free to go. Well, what was happening, they said, well, can I search your car? When they say no, the police were saying, well, if somebody says no, that means there's drugs in the car, so I can detain them even longer. No. And if I didn't say it before, no. Okay. The denial of the K-9 is not reasonable suspicion. They waited 7 to 8 minutes for a backup officer, so they run the K-9 around the car. The K-9 alerts, finds methamphetamine. They challenged it all the way up to the Supreme Court, Rodriguez v. U.S. The government said, look, we only kept them there for 7 to 9 minutes, 7 to 8 minutes. So they called it the de minimis argument. Said it's no big deal. It's just a few minutes waiting on the dog. It's not like we kept them there for a half an hour. The Supreme Court very rarely does this. They said, look, this is how long you can keep someone waiting on the dog. 0 minutes and 0 seconds, period. There is no de minimis, there's no 2 minutes, there's no 3 minutes, it's 0. So if anybody has a question about that, send them to me and I'll slap them and tell them it is 0. How long can you keep somebody waiting on the dog? Say it out loud. 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Good. Now, let's see how we should have done this situation. Someone gets stopped for speeding. Hi, I'm writing the ticket. Can I search your car? No, you can't search my car. Okay. Get on the radio, hey, give me some backup over here while you're still writing the ticket. So then the backup gets there, you run the dog around the car then. While the traffic stop is still going on, you haven't extended that detention. All you're doing is conducting a reasonable traffic stop. You haven't told them you're now free to go. You're not waiting on the dog. So the dog runs around the car and alerts. Then the officer has reasonable suspicion to continue the detention. We're okay. So this process of here's all your stuff back. You're basically free to go. All right, can I search your car? No. Now, wait a minute, before you go, I'm gonna run my dog around the car. 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Anything, if you find a dead 9-year-old girl in the trunk of that car, I can't use it. If you find 7,500 pounds of cocaine, you just found a 7,500 pound headache, because all you get to do is destroy it. Nobody goes to jail. It's a waste of time. So, during the traffic stop, if you got a dog there, run the dog around the car. If you have to wait for backup or wait for the dog to actually show up without reasonable suspicion, it's not going to fly. So let's say the person gets pulled over and there's air fresheners all over the car. They have a long history of drug offenses. You have 2 people in the car. One says that they were at their uncle's funeral in Houston, and the other one says they were at a strip club in Houston. Conflicting stories. You put all that together, and now you have reasonable suspicion, and you can wait on the dog for a reasonable amount of time. We'll say 15, 20 minutes for the dog to show up. But that's reasonable suspicion that they're carrying. That's how people carry drugs. They're too stupid to actually talk to each other. Hey, where did we just come back from? We just came back from Houston. What were we doing there? Criminals are not smart. But again, wrap up the traffic stop. You essentially give them their stuff back, tell them they're free to go. How long can we wait on the dog? 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Cases that also justify warrantless arrest. If there's an accident case, like most cars have a seatbelt computer in them. It logs the last 5 seconds of everything that happened, so that information can be downloaded as part of an accident investigation without doing a warrant. If the vehicle itself has been subject to the crime, like running over a pedestrian or being involved in a hit and run or something like that, or when the vehicle is abandoned. So a lot of drunk drivers get their vehicles stolen, and then they say, oh, my vehicle was stolen, and it's wrapped around a tree, 10 miles from their house, and they've got broken arms. I've had that happen before. I'm like, are you sure? You just so happen to break your arms on the same day, and you've got Ford logo printed in your head from you bouncing off the dashboard. Okay, well, that's considered an abandoned vehicle. A lot of police officers try to justify looking into a vehicle because they call it an inventory. And an inventory search is perfectly okay as long as it's done within departmental guidelines. So here's an example of a case that came up not too long ago. The police pulled the vehicle over, and I think the guy had a suspended license, and they wanted to search it for drugs. Well, they didn't have a probable cause to search it for drugs. So they said, oh, we're going to do an inventory. So they towed the car for suspension or whatever the case may be. And they inventoried it and pulled the door panels off and found cocaine. Okay, if you're pulling door panels off of a car, that is not an inventory. That's a vehicle search. And they said, yeah, we were looking for cocaine, but we did it under an inventory. Well, all that cocaine just became a big headache because if you find money, it's okay. You find money in the door panels, you get to keep there. The government can still keep that. Just nobody can be prosecuted for it. It has a use. Cocaine has no use unless you're like, we had a sergeant in North Louisiana. He was selling cocaine, but that's a whole different story for state police. It must not be in bad faith. So if you're doing an inventory, it's to say, hey, is there anything in this vehicle that the record driver might steal that we need to keep numbers on? Vehicles can be impounded for numerous reasons. No insurance, not inspection sticker, like a suspended driver's license, so forth and so on, or used in the commission of a crime, but it has to be impounded again within state law. Once they're impounded, it gets inventoried. Hey, what's in here? When I was with state police, I had to tow a lot of cars because I pulled over a lot of drunk drivers, and we had a list that we went through. We started with, is there anybody in the vehicle that's sober? A lot of times there were. It's like, you had a sober driver, why didn't you just let them drive? Because I drive better when I'm drunk, that's what they say. Anyway, you have a sober driver in the vehicle. So I'm not going to inventory that car because there's no reason to. This driver is just authorizing me to let his friend have it. That's okay. Call somebody to come get it. Call and get 2 licensed drivers to the scene, one to drive them there and the other to drive the vehicle out. And that's an agreement between the person I arrested and the person that comes and picks up the vehicle. No reason to inventory it there. If they steal something, that's their problem. But got to be careful. A lot of times they would show up, they'd be drunk too. So anyway, I call that a twofer, 2-for-1. You know, 1 traffic stop, 2 drunk drivers. And then a third option would be, do you know a record service that you want us to call? And they say, yeah, I know a record service. My favorite was Atomic. I never could tell anybody that, but I still use them today if I needed a record. Anyway, so if they say Atomic shows up, that's an agreement between them and Atomic, not my problem. So if Atomic steals something from them, that's their fault. Now, if that wasn't an option, they said, well, nobody's in the car, nobody for me to call, and lastly, I don't know any record companies. Okay, last one is I'd call a wrecker from the state. Okay, we need a wrecker, and we had a rotation we used, and they'd show up. So basically, I'm taking responsibility for that vehicle, the state is. So then I have to do an inventory, listing, you know, what kind of radio's in it, what valuables are in it, what damage is on the vehicle, you know, right now. Write all that down. And if I'm looking in the console for valuables and find marijuana, then I could prosecute them for possession of marijuana. So that's an inventory. They're done They're done with a standardized process. If they're done outside agency guidelines, if there are no agency guidelines, any evidence found in that is not going to be acceptable. All right, so that wraps up vehicle stops. It's kind of a lot of information, but you might want to watch this video twice, but you should understand, one, as a police officer, what you can and can't do on a traffic stop, and you as a citizen, what the police can and cannot do on a traffic stop. So, I'll see you in chapter 9.